messing up my lovely cutting green. We've had the students back now in a part-time capacity for a couple of weeks, and we've been getting stuck into some jobs. The hedge is being cut and they're not doing too bad a job. I've been explaining that they need to lean back about 5 degrees, the hedges. Like the wedge on this, slightly at an angle, and in most places it's done quite well. So when you cut a hedge, the important thing to do is to cut the sides first and then cut the top last. But you can set a marker for the top of the hedge once you cut a side. And we're getting on with that. There were some great big thistles in here, which I pulled out along with some of the students, and we clipped back some of the edges along here. We're getting on top of some of the things that we had gotten a little bit behind with. So try and get some of the areas back to normal. I had a look at some of the videos from earlier on in the year, and this grass in this wild area has really grown a lot. It's quite nice to walk around now. We didn't get a huge amount of wildflowers in it, and a lot of the reason would be the fact that this ground is full of nitrogen that we've applied over the years, and nitrogen that is probably as a result of this plant, because clover, white clover, can fix nitrogen into the ground. But what we have got is some nice flowers. Speedwells, the clovers. This is probably a sucker from this tree. And this tree is a Tibetan cherry, or Prunus cerula. They have notoriously shallow horizontal roots and can be found 50 meters away from trees sometimes. This one's probably about 15 meters away. We got some nice thistles here, and I think I said before, but the grass is getting flattened down by our lovely foxes in some places. This is wild carrot and creepus. So it's kind of nice anyway, even if it hasn't got a lot of wildflowers in it. The natural look of this, along with the artistic quality of the in and out pathways, is quite nice as well. And the football pitch was badly in need of a cut last week, because I had broken the ride-on lawnmower and the battery was flat on the compact tractor. So when we got both of those sorted, we got the ride-on lawnmower to do a quick cut, and then we went back over it from a training point of view with some of the students using the compact tractor. We cut it nice and short. And it's in good nick now for some of the other students coming back on site, and I think some people want to have a bit of a party on this space next week. And the reason why they're going to have a party on this space is because most of the other lawn areas have long grass now, because we left them grow. This pathway really needs some work done. We'll have to, even though the ivy looks good here, we'll have to cut the ivy back a little bit so as the pathway is accessible. and it needs the leaf blower and maybe a rake as well. And Maybeen has pulled all the bindweed out and all of the weeds, and has this area ready for some replanting of nice herbaceous perennials in front of the cottage facade that was made a few years ago for bloom. The tomatoes and cucumbers have been doing great, and the aubergines are a little bit behind, and I don't know what happened. I can't put my finger on what exactly happened with the peppers, but they're a total disaster. The aubergines are starting to produce some fruits, if I can find one.
And I haven't grown this variety before, but this one definitely starts off white, and I'm assuming that it will actually produce, will darken up over time.
The tomatoes are
Ripening very well, and on the bottom here, this is a symptom of magnesium deficiency. And the reason why there's magnesium deficiency is quite common on tomatoes, but we haven't fed these tomatoes at all. If you look at the top leaves, which are the ones that will be more likely to get their nutrients because of apical dominance, that means that the top of the plant gets priority. If you look at those leaves, they're really dark and they're doing quite well. So I'm not really worried. But there is something that's a bit more worrying, and I've let it go because we're just too busy. Cucumbers, we've got colossal amounts of cucumbers off these. But now, the students were coming back a couple of weeks ago, and these were starting to show some signs of a few different things. You see these webs? And another one here, and the foliage is really mottled and discoloured. And then we've also got this. So we've got powdery mildew, which is a plant that's under stress is going to get powdery mildew. And these probably got inconsistent watering, and they didn't get the care that they needed to get. At the same time, they did quite well. They've produced a lot of cucumbers, and we've pulled probably, I'd say 50, 60 cucumbers off these already. But now they're starting to really struggle. There's a web on this one. And the mottling, which is kind of cool looking as well, in a way. It has its own cool vibe. But these plants are on their way out. They're not going to produce anything more. And even the mottling is happening on the remaining fruits, and they're getting disfigured as well. So that's, the web is from red spider mite. We also have still got some whitefly, but the Incarcia biological control that we put on these actually helped hugely in slowing down and kind of paralysing the effects of the whitefly. But what we've got here is red spider mite and powdery mildew. This end hasn't really succumbed to it just yet, and we've got some very healthy plants here at this end. And they've reached the top of the glasshouse, so I've started to throw them horizontally across the wires at the top. And they're producing fruits there as well. And these tomatoes were planted a bit later, but they're doing quite well. Like Lazarus, they rose from the dead because they were in a bad condition when they were put in. But these have beautiful fruits on them. These ones are Gardener's Delight, and we've got some plum varieties as well. I think somewhere. I'll find them now. Yeah, long plum varieties.
The tunnel is looking a lot cleaner thanks to Sean and Jonathan and Dylan. A lot of the things that we had started, the potatoes, some of the cabbages, they had finished and they were looking quite ropey. So we pulled them out and we've made space to plant some of these squashes and pumpkins. It's quite common to see powdery mildew on courgettes, but these ones have a little bit more than normal. They're still quite healthy on the top and it's nothing really to worry about. They are producing fruit
Very well, no problem. And we've picked quite a few off them there. And this guy here is probably on the limits of what the size that we kind of want on these plants. It'll still be okay, but any bigger and it starts to take a lot of the energy from the plant. That's a nice fruit. Two more there need to be picked as well.
The strawberry plants, these ones are perpetual strawberries, so they'll produce all summer. I think we talked about these in the previous video. They're doing really well too.
And they're producing a lot of fruit.
And unfortunately the grapevine, even though it's produced some really nice bunches of grapes, we've kind of lost the battle with the powdery mildew. It's just happened that this plant has gotten powdery mildew for the last 25-30 years, back since the time when Jerry Daly, who'll be known to a lot of Irish people, produced the programme Room Outside. And Room Outside was actually filmed here for 10 years in Park House. And this grapevine was his, and he left it behind in the glass house, and we moved it 2 years ago. And it had been getting powdery mildew for the last 20 years, so I would say the spores are all down through the stem. And it was really hard to keep it at bay. I sprayed it maybe 5-6 times with SB Invigorator, which has a mildewicide. What I'm going to try next year is to peel off, this is a recommended process for pests and diseases and to allow better sap flow, is to peel off all this old bark like this and get right down to a clean piece of stem like that. And hopefully a lot of the mildew spores that are in along these stems, when we cut it back and we spray probably earlier and more diligently. If we spray more diligently, then hopefully we can keep them at bay. And I know, because we've been doing a lot of formative pruning on this plant, we're going to get a hell of a lot more fruits next year. I think this variety is called Chasselas, and I don't have any experience with it. So I need to look up Chasselas or Casselas, C-H-A-S-S-E-L-A-S, and I need to look up a bit more. The only one I have more experience with is Black Hamburg, and that one will grow in your pocket. The Victoria plum tree is laden, as it is most years. Some years it takes a rest, but most years it gets absolutely laden. And anybody who knows a Victoria plum knows that they almost break their branches with the weight of fruit. Fantastic tree, but to its own detriment. Sometimes it gets quite ill in the long run because of the fact that the breaking branches cause infection and cause a disease called silverleaf to enter it. But this one at the moment is producing a huge amount of really nice fruit. Every single year it does get a fungal disease on some of the fruit, but it doesn't seem to affect all the fruit. It's a type of a mold, a grey mold, which I need to look up and I'll put on screen hopefully if I can tell you what the name is. I'd be familiar with it, but just not the name.
But we don't spray here. This is what happens. Kind of a mold spore, and it spreads from fruit to fruit. Maybe some sort of cultural work to maybe thin the fruits and allow a little bit more air circulation around them would be the best thing to do. But the fruits that are ripe are really nice. And they're almost there. This one is. Pudding green is getting a little bit dry. I put a feed on it yesterday. Movavi, which is a fertilizer, an organic based fertilizer, nitrogen based one, and it also has a natural moss killing action. And it's looking okay, it's not too bad. Tom cut the grass today and he did a nice job. He's learning to use the cylinder more efficiently. This was in the last video, which was the plant ID video. Herbaceous perennials, and this one is Leucanthemum maximum, known as a dog daisy or a Shasta daisy or a marguerite. One of my favourite names is the dog daisy because if you smell the flower, it has a bit of a smell of wet or sweaty dog. This is a strimmer, two-stroke strimmer. It's also known as a multi-tool because it's not just a strimmer. So a multi-series, a multi-tool, because of the fact that from here up is interchangeable with the likes of one of these Hedge trimmer tops. You can also get a sweeping brush top, a rotavator top, a chainsaw top, and various other tops. Some of the machines, the still machines, you can get a leaf blower top for them. I'm going to use this now to do some trimming of the long grass on the wildflower area. So you'll notice I brought the machine outside. This is the first thing that we do all the time when we are going to use a machine. Bring it outside into a well ventilated area, and when it's outside in the well ventilated area you can check to see if it needs fuel. This machine, as I mentioned, is known as two-stroke, and two-stroke is starting to get less common because of the battery-powered machines. Two-stroke machines take a mixture of oil and petrol, and that would be two-stroke oil and petrol mixed together in a mix that goes into the tank, and it's in the machine because the machine doesn't have an oil sump. That means that the lubrication happens through the fuel, the lubrication of the fuel. And nowadays that is a dirty way of doing things. The machines they run at higher revs. You can use them at any angle. You can use them for purposes that you couldn't use bigger machines for, and they're very convenient for that reason, but they are a little bit less environmentally friendly because you're burning fuel and oil, and they're generally less efficient. So I do need fuel for this, and it turns out I don't have any fuel left, so maybe we'll use this as an opportunity to mix the two-stroke
mix of petrol and 2-stroke oil.
So I've brought out the 2-stroke oil. I've brought out the container that I will put the mixture into, and I've also brought out the unleaded petrol, which is in the green large can. So I'm going to mix the two of them together, and this particular machine runs at a ratio of 50:1. And a lot of the companies, this one is still, make a measurer to calculate how much goes into the mix of petrol and oil. And I don't know whether you can see this on the side, but basically 20 ml for 1 litre, 40 ml for 2 litres, 60 ml for 3 litres, 80 ml for 4 litres, and 100 ml for 5 litres. So 100 ml, essentially if you divide 5 litres by 50, that would give you 100 ml, and that's how it's worked out. What I do is I loosen off the cap so I can allow the air out and the fuel in, and I squeeze and it goes up the side, and as you can see it's rising now. So I'm going to be making 5 litres of mix, and there we have it. Now it is important to use a good quality 2-stroke oil. Your engine runs more efficiently and more environmentally friendly if you've got a good quality 2-stroke oil made for that machine. And also the life of your machine is extended by using a good quality oil and mixing the mix correctly. Mixing the mix incorrectly, say for example if you put too much 2-stroke oil in compared to petrol, that can mess up the carburetor, it can foul up the filters, it can make the engine run more smoky, which is not very good for the environment and not good for you, obviously, because you're breathing in that smoke if it's not running correctly. Putting in too little can do damage to the pistons. It can scratch the barrel where the pistons go up and down, and then the engine runs less efficiently, and eventually the machine will, I suppose, prematurely pack up or become seized or become unusable. So you're shortening the life of the machine. If you look after a machine properly, there's no reason why you can't keep it for 15, 20 years. The next thing I need to do is to add the petrol to this, and I want to put 5 litres of petrol into this on top of the 100 mils of oil. And I put in the 2-stroke oil first because pouring in the petrol will, on top of the mix, will mix it together correctly and start the process of it mixing together. If I added in the oil after the petrol, I'll have to shake a lot and mix a lot. This means that it actually shortens the process, makes it mix a little bit more easily and with less work. It's important to be careful when opening this, particularly on a warm day, because there could be a build-up of gas because of the heat. So gently open, you can spray all over your face otherwise. So there's a line on the side of this, and that actually tells me where 5 litres is. Also, this here is a self-stopping filler, fuel filler. So when I put this into the machine and I press the top of it like that, down like that, it will allow the fuel to fill up the tank but not overfill it and spill all over the place. Hopefully, that's the plan anyway. And that is the machine filled to the top with the appropriate petrol and oil mix, ensuring that the machine is looked after well and it runs properly. This is a 2-stroke strimmer, we would call it in Ireland and England. In America they call it a weed whacker, and in Australia they call it a whipper snipper, but they're all the same thing essentially. It's got the cord on the top. This machine, this part here of the top, when it's depressed will allow a little bit more cord out. It's got a cutter here at the side, and it's got a protection hood to stop it going back at you. This is for a strap, and that's a safety lever, and if you don't have it depressed, this lever won't move in. That's to stop it catching on a branch when you leave it on the ground or kicking against it. Very important if you have a chainsaw or a hedge trimmer that you have this safety feature. It's a 2-stroke machine, and as mentioned before, it's also known as a multi-tool because this part here is detachable, and you can add a hedge trimmer or a pole chainsaw or a leaf blower. In some cases I think still have a leaf blower top, and rotavators and sweeping brushes and various different things that you can have. This particular one, we're using the strimmer. And it's a 2-stroke machine, and most 2-stroke machines have the same basic setup. We're a little bit out of date now because of the fact that we are starting to get into battery power in a serious way, because it's more environmentally friendly. But these 2-stroke machines, they have a similar setup, some slightly different to others. This particular one, you switch the on button, you switch it to down for stop and up for go. So up for go. The next thing you need to do is to press this little bladder and give it a few pumps. Now, different machines again will have different ways of doing it, and this is for the first start. After you've started it up and the machine is warm and you've used it within the last few minutes, depending on the weather, you won't have to do this again. And the third thing you're going to have to do if it's a cold start is to put the choke up. Now, as far as I know, this is the international symbol for choke. Diagonal across, which means that it's blocking some of the air coming in through the air intake into the carburetor, and then in line, allowing air through those two lines, is choke off. And when the machine is running efficiently, you will have the choke off. When the machine is cold, there'll be less need for air because of the compression there, and there will be more need for a little bit more fuel. As the machine starts up and starts to run, you will hear that it heats up very, very quickly, certainly in the case of this machine, and it starts to run efficiently very, very quickly. So if you don't knock this back down after you start it, the machine will essentially, the mix is too rich, that it's getting more fuel and less oxygen or air. In order for a spark to happen, in order for an explosion to happen, it's really important to have oxygen. You've probably noticed that if you put a glass over a candle, eventually the candle will go out. Oxygen is essential for combustion, and the combustion is happening in here in the piston, and the spark plug is providing the spark. But you need fuel and you also need oxygen for it to happen. So just to recap, we turn the machine on, we pump the bladder a couple of times, we put the choke to the diagonal position, and then we start the engine. Place one hand on top of the machine to hold it steady and pull with the other hand. Once the machine has made an effort at starting, push down the choke to the position that allows the most air in. So this is what I'm going to strim down short. It was a wildflower area. It's gotten a little bit raggy, and at this time of the year, coming up to August, is a good time to do a first cut. And I'll leave the grass. I'll leave the grass there, and hopefully any seeds of wildflowers or the grass will actually fall onto the ground. And then after a week or so, I'll pull it away. I did this side here with an old side, just to compare the difference of speed and efficiency. So it'll be interesting to see the difference. I might put a little bit of video of me using the side. It's not the sharpest in the world, but it still works. This is what I did with it there last week, this side. But we might put it up as a little bit of a comparison, and I'll give you my thoughts on the differences between the two. So I'm going to strim a little bit over this area here. Now, just a couple of things to talk about here. Safety wise, you need eye protection, head protection and ear protection if you're using this machine. Now, if you're within the European Union, all machines will have these blue signs on them, and they're color coded in that way. If you look at various different ones here, there'll also be yellow signs, so and then red signs. The red and white there to say that you shouldn't be taking drugs or drinking if you're going to use this machine for obvious reasons. It also shows here, I think, that you need head protection. It's a little marked, but eye protection, and red instruction. Down on this end, because as I said, this is a separate part, you can show the head protection, the eye protection and the ear protection. Read the manual to show that there's a possibility of stones and things keeping up. And blue and white is mandatory. That means you must. And this here is a yellow and black sign. And again, in the European Union, if something is yellow and black, it essentially means this is a cautionary or an advisory thing. And people should be within 50 feet or 15 meters of you when you're using this machine, in case you should throw up a stone, a piece of debris, or any sort of a projectile. And it also says that it runs at 8,500 revs maximum. That's if you have it at full throttle. Just for the purposes of explaining the different types of signage, the black, red and white signs are prohibitory. Prohibitory means you are prohibited from using this machine if you have used drugs, or you've been drinking, or you're on medication that makes you drowsy. And then in terms of the clothing you wear, it must be tight fitting. You don't want to have any sort of loose fitting clothing that can get caught in a machine. You don't want to have long hair that can get caught in a machine. This is for all machines with any sort of moving parts. And that you have your arms covered. So today you can see I have my sleeves up, but I've got, there you go, they're down now. I've got long sleeves.
So I'll be wearing this head protection, and I will be wearing long sleeves, and I've got long trousers as well. So that's what you need in order to use this machine. So I'm going to start cutting now, and because the machine is warm, I probably will not need to use the choke again this time. Let's just have a go anyway. And there you go. No need for a choke. The machine is warmed up nicely. Of course, it is a warm day today. On a very cold day in the winter, you may not be able to start it up without putting the choke on. Something that you'll notice when you're watching me is that I'm moving the machine, in this case, from right to left. And the reason why I'm moving from right to left is that's throwing the grass clippings towards me. Now that might sound counterintuitive, but because it's very long grass, if I go the other way, it'll throw the grass away from me, but also into the grass that I'm trying to cut next. And you'll very quickly kind of clog up the area that you're trying to cut. So going from right to left, as you'll see, what it does is it moves the grass out of the way for the next cut.